So before I bring up Keela to introduce our main program, I'd like to make an announcement. So today, Seattle 4 is honored to have Dow Constantine join our Diplomacy Task Force Blue Ribbon Panel, along with our current members, which include, I'm going to name some names, and I've seen a few of you in the audience, so if you want to give a wave. So include Cyrus Habib, who's the State of Washington Lieutenant Governor, Hyun-jung Lee, who is the Consul General of Korea, Brandon Lee, over in the corner there, Consul General of Canada, Yuro Yamada, Consul General right there of Japan, Roberto Dondish, who's Consul Emeritus of Mexico, and also, I believe, is the co-chair of the task force, Alex Fan, Director General, Taipei Economic and Cultural Office, Mark Gancher, Honorary Consul of Ethiopia, Teresa Indelek Davis, Honorary Consul of Poland, and also President of the Consular Association of Washington, Ralph Monroe, former Secretary of State, and former President of Seattle Rotary, and also Ezra Teshome, who is past Rotary District Governor 5030, and the Diplomacy Task Force Ambassador to the district, and also myself. So we are very excited to have you, Dow, join in collaborating with us and supporting local, regional, and global goodwill efforts to build a civil society. And also, even better, as you heard from Skip, Dow is a 20-plus year Rotarian, and he has his Seattle 4 Rotary application halfway filled out. Yeah, so we're getting there. We look forward to your introduction, Dow. So to introduce our main program is Keela Hall, and just a little bit about Keela before I bring her up. So Keela runs KD Hall Communications, a boutique consulting firm with expertise in the area of leadership, team assessment, and development. And before deciding on her undergraduate degree in mass communications, Keela wanted to be a pathologist. So at the tender age of 16, she had an internship at the Wayne County Morgue in Detroit. But not to worry, if anything weird happened, Keela can run far, fast. She was a semifinalist in the 1998 Junior Olympics for the 1,600 meters race. Please help me welcome Keela.
You have to love Cindy. I am honored to introduce King County Executive Dow Constantine. Thank you for being here with us today. Dow is serving his third term as King County Executive. Executive Constantine believes that real prosperity must be shared by all and has ensured that equity and social justice are considered in every action taken by King County. A former member of the King County Council and the Washington State Senate and House of Representatives, Dow is a 3-time University of Washington alum and an attorney licensed in Washington State for the past 28 years. Throughout his public service career, Dow has been an outspoken advocate for environmental protection, public transit, and government reform. Please stand to your feet and help me welcome Dow Constantine to Seattle 4.
Thank you, Keela. My staff will make note that every one of my introductions is now going to have a command standing ovation. That's good. And thank you, President Cindy, as well, for welcoming me back here to the mothership, to Seattle 4. Yes, I have been a West Seattle Rotarian for some 23 or so years now, and as my job has become busier and busier and busier, it gets harder and harder and harder to get over to West Seattle at noon on Tuesdays. So I thought the better part of valor was to quit appearing only by makeups, which, by the way, thank you for the makeup today, and to instead ask for the opportunity to join Seattle 4. So as soon as, yes. As soon as staff gets done helping me fill out the other half of the application, we'll be all set to go. I'm really grateful to be able to be here today with a group of folks, many of whom I've known for quite a long time. I see people around this. I'm a lifelong Seattleite. I've lived in essentially the same few blocks in West Seattle for the last 57 and a half years. And I do see people in this room I've known for well more than half of that time. And I'm now as well, so my folks are still there. They live effectively across the street. And I'm able to bring our little 4-year-old West Seattleite over to visit with Grandma and Grandpa every day after preschool. So in that sense, it's kind of a real blessing and a bit of an idyllic or ideal life to be able to be in a community like this and like that. But also very interesting to stay in one place and watch everything change around you. And I know some of you have this same experience. It's like being in the middle of a time lapse, like the fixed point in a time-lapse film. And a lot of the work we do at King County has to do with responding to that phenomenon, to the rapid pace of change and the way in which it's unsettling to people, not just emotionally, but socially and economically. And I want to talk a little bit about that today. First, I want to start by helping orient you, as I do, our employees toward our purpose. And our purpose at King County, which I took a while to distill down to a very few words, is that we are creating a welcoming community where every person has the opportunity to thrive. Very simple idea, but virtually all the work we do at King County, from helping veterans to treating sewage, is all aimed toward this idea that every one of us has value and every one of us should have the conditions to be able to express that value and to make the most of the few years that we have here in this community and on this earth. The way we do that is, I'll get to that in a second, but the way we do that is really by seeking to empower our employees to bring their best to the task of serving the public every day. What is that public? The King County is a jurisdiction about 2.25 million now. We've been growing very rapidly, and that makes us the 13th largest of the nation's more than 3,200 counties, and we are larger than 15 states as well, and really economically even larger than that. I mean, if you think about the businesses that are headquartered here, the remarkable prosperity you've all seen rising up around us, this place is of national and global significance, and it is both a tremendous opportunity and a real challenge to deal with those forces. What do we do? We provide regional services. So King County is the transit agency for the entire jurisdiction of the county. We provide sewage treatment. We are the public health agency. We also own the public health hospital, which is also the regional trauma hospital, not just for King County, but for the entire northwestern United States. And we have a little international airport called Boeing Field. There are many of these services that are provided, whether you live in one of our 39 cities or whether you're one of the 250,000 residents of our unincorporated area. But for those who live in the unincorporated area, which with a couple exceptions like White Center and Skyway is mostly rural now, because we've really been pursuing our work under the Growth Management Act to get urban areas inside of cities. If you live in the unincorporated area, we are your local government. So I'm your mayor, and we provide the police protection. We, when funds are available, pave your roads. We issue permits much better than we did 10 years ago when I took office. And all of that work is now being really lifted up by a change that I've made. I created this year a Department of Local Services, and they started January 1st. And then we had the biggest snowstorm we've had in decades, so they got their inauguration. It was a really successful transition because we want, whether it's an expressly local service or whether you're an unincorporated resident trying to access some of the regional services we provide, you need somebody to be there to help be your advocate. And if you live in a city, you can call your mayor or your city council member. But we really needed a point of contact for people in King County. So that is something I've been working toward for a long time, and I'm excited it happened. And then some of those local services we also provide to smaller cities on contract. So the sheriff might be the police department for your small city, or the district court might be your municipal court, or for a lot of cities, our regional animal services is the animal care and control function. I want to dwell on this just for a moment, because a little over a decade ago, I was calling for King County to either reform or get out of the animal care and control business, because we were not very good at it. We had a euthanasia rate of over 40%, which I will tell you is not unusual for a public open access shelter, one that accepts all animals coming in. But I felt that it was unacceptable, and there were others who were trying to establish a much higher standard around the country. And so I, when I became executive, set our employees to work on figuring out what we could do to do much better by the animals as well as by the people who care about them. And they brought their creativity. They worked in animal care because they cared about animals, right? So they brought their creativity, they brought their experience, they brought their innovation. And today, we have worked our way up to having a save rate of over 95% of the animals that come into our shelter. And that is not easy. I mean, we talk about no-kill shelters. That standard is considered to be about 90%. So we are going well beyond that, and we're doing it in a shelter that has to take any animal, no matter how sick or injured it is. And that is a model that we're now seeking to expand around the state and around the country. It is possible to do, and because it's possible, I think we have an absolute moral obligation to make it happen. But the mechanism that I described, empowering our employees, is the one that we have been deploying to solve a lot bigger problems even than our little animal services agency. We brought in these private sector practices of continuous improvement and employee engagement when I took office. And some of you know Fred Jarrett. He was one of my rivals in the election. I immediately hired him as deputy executive because we were talking about a lot of the same things. And I put him in charge of helping us figure out how we could bring these business practices and adapt them to use in the public sector. And he did a great job at that. He retired at the end of last year, and he's still around, of course, because he's Fred. But a lot of that work is now being carried on by professionals who he helped hire. And it's very exciting to see the progress that we're able to make across a whole range of issues. I'm going to talk about three kind of large buckets of subject matter, and then I'm going to turn it over for questions. All of your questions, by the way, will be about homelessness. I predict. And I will start by talking about people, about the human element. We'll talk about people, about the natural environment, and about the built environment, okay? So King County really interacts with people to create the conditions for them to thrive in a whole range of ways. I mentioned public health. So in public health, we're doing basic things like preventing communicable diseases or making sure this food you're eating is healthy. But we're also trying to find ways to reduce the factors in community that are causing increased mortality and morbidity for people who live in certain neighborhoods, in poverty, or in neighborhoods that are historically a higher number of minority residents. And this is morally urgent because in King County, you can go just a few miles and find a difference of some 10 years in average lifespan. And a lot of it is about these environmental or societal factors that we should be able to have some control over. So if we know we can do that, we, again, have a moral obligation to do so. And one of the most sort of stark examples that we see of the inequities and inequality in our region is the tremendous challenge we have with homelessness. And it's born of a lot of factors. And we actually brought together all sectors of the community, probably some people in this room, around something called One Table to help us really get down to brass tacks about what are all those factors, and for people to agree that just because their hobby horse happened to be this particular factor didn't mean that yours wasn't also important and necessary. So the housing crisis is a real crisis. I can go more into that in the question and answer session when you all ask questions about homelessness, but it is a real thing, and that is the factor that's causing a lot of other bumps in the road to become life-altering catastrophes rather than momentary inconveniences. But also clearly behavioral health, access to behavioral health treatment, the opioid epidemic that started with pharmaceuticals and of course spreads to street drugs. The fact, and this is something we recognize by working with those who have lived experience and welcoming them to one table, that so many of the people who are homeless have exited a system in which they were dependent. The criminal justice system or the foster care system or the mental health system where they weren't in the position of standing on their own 2 feet, and then the door opens and out they go, and they just fall right back to the curb and then come back either into the mental health system or the judicial system. That has to stop, right? And yeah. And to do that, you need, what they told us is not just the list of URLs with here are the services you're eligible for. You need an actual person who understands your situation to grab your hand as you walk out that door and help you build momentum until you're able to begin more and more taking care of yourself and rebuilding your life and rebuilding your dignity and rebuilding your confidence and your self-sufficiency. That is capacity that is sorely lacking still. And you got to build it one program and one person at a time, but we know it's a thing that has to happen and we can do it. And then, and this is where I get into sounding like a grumpy old man, jobs, right? You got to work. And we need to be able to provide people the training and the connections and the opportunity to simply earn a decent living and be able to keep a roof over their heads. And an awful lot can come simply by having the chance to get out of bed in the morning, clock in, put in a solid 8 hours, and at the end of the pay period get a check that will allow you to pay your rent. A lot of good can come in all these other areas from that. So in King County, in conjunction again with our partners, including the cities, philanthropies, nonprofits, and so forth, we are working to create more shelter capacity that has the services that allow people not simply to cycle through shelter, but to begin to make forward progress. Last week I opened 40 beds in the old west wing of the downtown jail, and that is going to be 24 hours a day. So you can bring your stuff and lock it up. You can sleep in a place that's safe. You have access to toilets and showers and sinks and laundry and the services so that you can begin to piece together what it's going to take for you to get out of that place and into permanent housing. And that is much different than having to come in at night, sleep on a mat, and then get kicked out at 7 in the morning because you can never get any forward momentum, right? Yesterday, and this is another element of the system that's lacking capacity but it's growing, we went to, and I got to cut the ribbon on a place called Clement Place. It's at 96th, I think, in Aurora. I don't know which direction I'm pointing here, but let's just pretend that's north, 96 in Aurora. And it is run by Downtown Emergency Service Center, right? And it is a place that has about 100 units for people with pretty significant challenges. And you don't have to be sober and you don't have to be cured of all your ills to come there, but you can get into a place that's secure, it's your permanent home, and then we can provide the services to help you begin to rebuild your life, whatever your challenge happens to be. And there are several thousand people out there in the streets right now for whom this is the kind of facility that is needed, one that is permanent, secure, and has the right level of service. Not the emergency room, not the jail, which are very expensive, but the correct, humane, effective level of service. More about that in our questions and answers. I did want to mention before we left health, though, that one of the biggest advances we've made in this county is following the adoption of the Affordable Care Act. We, rather than setting up a big bureaucracy to get people enrolled, we partnered with more than 24 community-based agencies that already had constituencies, especially among those who are the hardest to reach. And we had them go out and help sign people up for affordable health care. And we reduced by more than half the number of uninsured in this county. The rate of uninsured among kids is now only 1.6%, which I think is pretty much nation leading. And that is one of the ways in which we enable people to be able to fulfill their potential. One other way we use the same network, the same partnership approach, was in preventing family and children homelessness. So does anybody remember the words "Best Starts for Kids"? Yes, okay. So this is the program that, like, statistically about 3/4 of you in this room voted for, that is helping us invest in the very youngest children so that they show up at kindergarten with healthy brain development, caught up with their peers, ready to succeed, and then make sure we screen for challenges they might have along the way. Well, one of the biggest adverse childhood experiences, of course, is housing insecurity and homelessness. So we took some of the earliest funds and we used this kind of a network, giving them flexible funds to reach out to people and say, what is it going to take to keep you and your family securely housed this month? And the results were remarkable. In the first 2 years, we had some 6,000 people who were kept housed at a very, very low cost compared to getting people out of homelessness. And the best part about that was that many of them didn't need actual direct financial aid at all. They just needed somebody to help them navigate a system or call their landlord and negotiate or make sure that their kid was signed up for the right school, those sorts of things, simple things. But that prevention model is one that we have to adopt across a lot of the challenges we have. Moving upstream, and that's the whole point of Best Starts for Kids, moving upstream to prevent little problems from becoming life-consuming crises later on. Very quickly on the natural environment, and I'm just going to ignore your timing down here because I got more to talk about. We said, do you want more time for talking or questions and answers? I picked questions and answers. Turns out I was wrong. The Land Conservation Initiative I established, I got into politics starting with preserving a little wooded ravine in our West Seattle neighborhood when I was in law school, I guess. Last year we rolled out an idea that I had, and it was brought together by dozens of people in the community, called the Land Conservation Initiative, to protect the sort of last best 65,000 acres of wilderness and open space and trail connections in King County, to do it not over the 80 years it was going to take us at the pace we're going, but in a single generation before that land is gone. And the Land Conservation Initiative is using the Conservation Futures tax funds, but bonding against them to get the land while it's still there. But also, it's connected with the Parks Levy Renewal, which is on your ballot this fall. And that will allow us to do things like finish big portions of that East Side Rail Corridor trail, or knit together some of the open space that those who came before us purchased, going all the way back to the 1968 Forward Thrust Measure. This is work that is a generational responsibility. That in each generation, yes, we have to build infrastructure, and I'll talk about in a second, but we also have to protect the things that we all collectively care about, even in the face of a growing population and a changing global climate. So we are doing that. You are doing that. And this place will be better than it would have been without you, because we're preserving a whole lot of the wilderness, the parks, the open space that our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy. We're also removing culverts and opening up salmon habitat that's been lost for decades, in some cases for over a century. And we are moving forward apace and making sure that we're opening up this biennium 150 miles of salmon habitat that have been cut off to help the orcas, to help our struggling salmon runs. This is critically important work that we're way out ahead on. I'm going to skip down and just talk about built infrastructure, and then I'll answer your questions. You know, your Metro Transit, we're converting it quickly to an all-electric bus fleet. We are, I think, in the lead nationally in that effort. You have the nation's best large transit system, according to the American Public Transportation Association. You also have the only one that is growing, and growing rapidly, in ridership. And I'm very proud of the work we've done to turn around Metro Transit that was really struggling about 10 years ago having to make transit cuts. We are working hard to make sure that we're building a system that is a true alternative to sitting in congestion. And it is, in concert with Sound Transit, going to really change the face of the land use in this region. Sound Transit 3 was a heavy lift, right? I was sore pretty much from the 1970 when we failed to approve a rail measure for this region, all the way through to when I joined the Sound Transit Board in about 2008. And then I spent the ensuing 8 years after that trying to figure out how to build us up to being able to finally make the commitment, nearly a half century later, to build the transit system this region needed. Now, you may have been for it or you may have been against it, but I can tell you you're going to use it, and we needed to do it. And I had to take some lumps for doing it, but we're getting it built. And we should never allow ourselves to fall that far behind again on the infrastructure that a growing population and a growing economy need. And, you know, I guess finally, the work that we've done in streamlining our processes, in empowering our employees, and I haven't even talked about fixing our finances at King County, but we have been enormously diligent about undoing old bad financial practices, so much so that we have consistently now had a AAA bond rating, which is saving you hundreds of millions of dollars over time. We were awarded by Harvard University the Innovations in American Government Award for the savings that we achieved working with our labor unions to save $50 million over 5 years on employee health care while improving employee health outcomes. And we also received just a couple weeks ago the American Society for Public Administration Award, the Organizational Leadership Award for Performance and Continuous Improvement. No award could have a duller title. But we are enormously proud of it because it's allowing us to achieve substantive, important results. I want to thank you so much for having me here, and in the 1 minute remaining, I'd like to take whatever questions you might have.
Gal, before you get to homelessness, I want to sneak one in on infrastructure. I live on the east side, tremendous amount of new build growth. Are you folks tasking the developers to fund the infrastructure needs to keep up with it?
Yes, so the question is about development fees, and cities are largely in charge of levying those kinds of taxes or fees on those buildings within their jurisdictions. Again, the entire urban area pretty much is inside of cities. So one of the dynamics I work with is that we have the unincorporated area, we're left with 1,500 miles of road, over 180 aging bridges, and all the cheapest, least taxable land and hardly any businesses that are profitable. So there's a misalignment under state law between taxes, the tax system, and the way we've been asked to govern ourselves. And that's got to get fixed. But I and Kathy Lambert are pretty much the only ones yelling about it right now, so we got to get some traction on that. The fact is that light rail is opening on the east side in historical terms almost immediately. In 2023 to downtown Bellevue and out to Microsoft, and then I think just a few months after that to downtown Redmond, which is well built and ready for rail to arrive. It's an exciting change, and you can see at every station location the anticipation right there in steel and concrete. And it's coming up in Northgate and all of the places that have a light rail station on the horizon. And it's very exciting. And even the most delightful part of all of this is even the people who fought me on getting light rail deployed are now doing their developments at light rail stations. I just love it. You know.
Hi, Dow. Lauren from Seattle Foundation. We're happy to be great partners with the county. I'm curious if you could speak to a little bit of the problems we're experiencing in terms of the fragmentation across, between a multi-county region, not just here in King County, but how our economy and how people move about, and some of the things the county might be doing to address some of those major problems you mentioned in defragmenting the system and getting people to the table.
Yeah, this is really a sort of core challenge that we have regionally and that I have as an executive. This state was set up in a time of great distrust of centralized power and authority. So we have 39 cities in King County, dozens more in the adjacent counties. We have over 1,000 elected officials in this one county alone. And we now have a metropolis essentially grown to encompass all of those jurisdictions and all of those fiefdoms and all of those taxing districts. And so that's, that's why Sound Transit was created, because you had to have a regional system, but there was no mechanism for creating it. So the legislature had to superimpose it on top of these old jurisdictional boundaries. And a lot of the work we're doing in homelessness, a lot of the work we're doing in the environment, a lot of the work we're doing across the board requires us to engage in this elaborate cat herding exercise and to get everyone on the same page. And I would say that well over half of my effort is spent not on creating good policies or on deploying solutions, but on simply trying to get people aligned, dozens, hundreds, thousands of people aligned around where we're going to go, right? And I don't think there's a simple fix for that, but it's true not just of governments, it also involves philanthropy, nonprofits, the business community, labor organizations, everybody. Sound Transit was actually a very good exercise in that because the pro campaign was everybody. And we had equally the State Labor Council and the business community. We had environmental groups and advocacy groups. We had everybody at the same table pushing in the same direction because everybody realized there was something that needed to get done. And we got to have that same approach for all of these other truly regional challenges.
Here's Jeff, the president of our Seattle Rotary Foundation.
Thank you for being with us today. Quick compliment on the homelessness front. The transition of incarceration infrastructure to get it back to its key focus of getting people back out is just a great thing. My quick question is, what is the overall King County budget and how do you benchmark that against best practices to make sure that you're on target with respect to efficiency? And then quickly, any news on the 2020 governor race you'd like to share?
If I have time. Now, only have 1 minute, is that right? Okay. The general fund budget's about $1 billion, and the overall budget is about $8 billion, but it's all dedicated funds for transit and for wastewater and for garbage and everything. So, once you get down to that smaller amount, most of it is criminal justice. And then you get down to a little tiny bit that's flexible funds that can be used for human services and so forth. That's why we've had to create some levies and a mental illness drug dependency fund to help pay for homelessness. But we do spend many tens of millions of dollars every year on homelessness, and hundreds of millions of dollars we've deployed for goosing the housing market and creating more affordable housing for those who cannot afford to be in this market. And the real key, we're bringing together with the City of Seattle and others a single entity that's going to focus all of our efforts in the emergency response for homelessness. So the inventory of shelter, so the services that are available to people who are homeless, making sure that we're leveraging the most for all the city, county, private money that's coming in. And I'm taking a shortcut here, but basically this is a response to what everybody at one table said we needed. Ultimately, we need a single point of accountability, a single point of data collection, a single focus, so that we can really get the most for everyone's collective efforts rather than this collection of good intentions, right? I forget what the second part of your question was, but it's okay, go ahead. Are we done? I got 1 minute. Okay. Yes. Got that right? Outstanding. Yeah. King County has a pretty robust agricultural economy, which nobody outside of King County believes, but it is, for the most urban county in this part of the country. If you've been around long enough, voted to create a farmland preservation program that helps save a lot of our arable lands from development. And we, in my time, have spent a lot of effort trying to figure out how we can help farmers be successful in the modern urban economy, help make sure that they can economically have environmentally responsible farming practices. And I think that we, in creating this sort of farm-to-table initiative, I think that we have really set ourselves up to be a model for other places where there's a changing economy, changing population, but you still want good, healthy food grown close to home. I thank you all for enjoying some of that good, healthy food. I thank you for inviting me today. Apparently, I'm going to be seeing a lot more of you here at Seattle 4, and have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.